Welcome to the AtoZrunning podcast, where we help runners thrive. I'm Andy.
And I am Zach, and up next, U.S. champ and pro marathoner Nell Rojas discusses the right way to work hard. And after that, World of Running updates about all these crazy records and the NCAA championships. Well, we have got an incredible series of things to share with you and talk about. So much excitement that it's hard to contain. For instance, it was the NCAA championships this weekend, which is already a lot of excitement by itself. And there's a Diamond League meet, which is just that much more excitement. And then there were world records all over the place.
And we're talking to Nell Rojas.
And
so it's like
we have a guest.
Amazing things.
So many amazing things. But, you know, despite all these amazing things, we still hold fast to the fact that the most amazing thing that we do for you is answer your questions.
Yeah.
And so, in order to do that, you need to submit them and share your questions with us. So go to AtoZrunning.com/question to do exactly that.
And we do have a monthly Q&A episode where we'll feature some of those questions.
Yes.
And I love getting messages from many of you and connecting with you on different levels, depending on if we're seeing each other in person, or I get a message like this from Kathy. She wrote, "Your podcast has made such a difference with my running. Today I did fartleks, and I remember Zach saying, just run like kids do. Go to that mailbox or to that tree, etc. And with Andy, I always think of you when I try to keep my eyes up." So thank you. I love hearing that. And I'm glad that you're finding that joy and also the benefit of actually having that be something that aids in your running and your training. So thank you for sharing, Kathy.
Good stuff. You are welcome. Speaking of good things, shout out to the Redman family. I don't know if they actually listen to the podcast. Matter of fact, I'm 100% sure they don't. But maybe they will if someone out there knows them and tells them, hey, you should hear because you got a shout out. So we were at this race at the Grand Valley State University Redemption Meet that we were mentioning on air. I went there and I ran in the 5,000 meters because
on the track
because, you know, those things are fun to do. And also this meet is loads of awesome because what it is it's like all ages and all ability levels are just running because they like to do it. Not just running, because they have the jumps and the throws and everything. And so, in fact, meet directors Q and Jane were informing me that they had like an Olympic level thrower at the meet.
Cool.
So, you know, like that, right? And then there was also a 5-year-old kid running in the 100 meters.
That's awesome.
So everything, okay? So I ran the 5,000 meters, and when I signed up, they said, you know, there's not a lot of people in the race, just so you know. And I was like, oh, that's fine. I'm doing this just for kicks, and I don't even know how it's going to feel because I'm 2 weeks post-marathon here, and you never know. So, well, I get there, and the other two people in the race happen to be twin brothers. I think they're twins. They're brothers, and if they're not twins, they're very nearly identical in age, so they must be. But the Redman family and their sons were there at the meet, and so these boys, about 8th to 9th grade, were running the 5,000 meters, and got to like chat a little bit beforehand. And it was kind of cool. They were like, you know, how fast do you think you're going to run this? And then one of them, I think, said, what high school do you go to? And I was like, you're funny. You're funny. I don't go to high school and haven't for decades. But the fact being, it was loads of fun. So chatting with them ahead of time kind of, you know, set the tone for like, this is going to be a fun experience. Ran the race. It went all right. It went better than expected. Get done with the race. And these dudes, like, were just hauling. They ran amazing. And they get done. They're like laying on the ground, like sprawled out. So I go over, you know, kind of like help pick them up and chatting with them a little bit. And lo and behold, their parents come down and I find out that I know their dad because I've worked with them in the past. And so then it was like, oh, hey, this is kind of cool. And just a little bit of, you know, connecting some dots over all these years. And these boys are just going to be amazing. They already are. But as they age, it's going to be fun to watch their careers blossom further. So cool things.
That's really
good luck to the Redman family.
I love that.
Well, speaking of fun things to do, this weekend, if you're in the West Michigan area, you've got it all because you can either run both or one or the other of the LPGA 5K and the Light Point 5K because it just so happens that schedule-wise, it's possible to run both races. So they tell me. I'm not sure you want to try to run one and then drive halfway across town to run the other.
I mean,
But
it could be a fun challenge.
you may. And if you do, we're going to help you out. So run that LPGA. It's the first of the two. And then use our discount code AtoZ15 for $15 off your race entry at Light Point.
Light Point.
That's
yes.
Light Point 5K. So if you are keeping up here, the Light Point 5K, it's in Grand Rapids, in West Michigan, 9 a.m. You can get $15 off with code AtoZ15.
Fun. It's going to be a fun weekend. I'm looking forward to it.
But it's also going to be a ton of fun hour right now with us because there's so many great things to share with you. So let's get on to it.
This week, we are honored to have on the show Nell Rojas. A little bit about her. She's a long-distance runner, U.S. champion, and coach at AtoZrunning. Nell was the top U.S. finisher at the 2021 and 2022 Boston Marathons. And this year at the Boston Marathon in 2023, she ran a marathon personal best of 2:24:51. And in 2022, she ran a half marathon personal record of 1:09:42 at Houston. Nell, with these times, is obviously globally competitive. But before all of her professional running started at Northern Arizona University, Nell was a 3-time Big Sky Conference champion. And after that, she debuted in the marathon in a really fast time of 2:31:23. And since that time, she's consistently placed well in races, such as winning Grandma's Marathon in 2019, and she was 10th at the New York City Marathon in 2022. And Nell was the U.S. champion in 2021 for the USATF 10-mile championship. Nell has remarkable achievements, and then paired with being a coach as well, she was an awesome person to have on the show to dive into the topic of how working harder isn't necessarily better. Let's get to our conversation with Nell. Hi, Nell. Welcome to the AtoZrunning podcast.
Thank you. How's it going?
It's going good. It was great to meet you recently in Grand Rapids. So that was really neat to connect. We've been following your running for a while now. And so it was cool to actually meet you in person.
Yeah, I know. It's always good to meet people that you've connected with on social.
Yeah, other platforms. And I got to meet your dad too, which was a pleasure.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Does he still coach you, or what's that situation there?
Yes, he is still my coach.
Okay, cool. I love that. Very cool to have like the legacy and the heritage of running in your family and in your life. That's really cool. And then you also coach athletes too. And that's part of the reason it's so awesome to have you on the show, because not only are you an athlete that competes at the highest level, but you're also a coach and you have great perspectives to bring to everyone here today. So we're really appreciative that you've come on to share your wisdom with us in both capacities. So that's really cool. I loved an article that you did with CNBC where you talked about how working harder isn't necessarily always better. And as I read the article, I was just like nodding along, and I was like, I need to talk about this with Nell, even though I had like several topics listed. There's just so many things that we could talk about today, but I'm excited to dive into this one. So I think we'll just start off with, what did you mean by that? What did you mean by working harder isn't necessarily better?
Yeah, basically, I think there's this like longstanding mindset that more is better, and the harder you work, the better you'll be. But I think it's the people that understand that that is not necessarily true. It's like being really smart about what you're doing. Is gonna give you better results. I heard this thing actually, this was only like yesterday or the day before on in a book, that it was like water boils at this is when does water boil?
Science lesson with Nell.
Yeah.
I don't know either though. So
it's like whatever. But water boils at a certain point. I'm gonna have to look that up. Water boils at a certain point. and it doesn't boil more after that point. So that's like a good thing to keep in mind, like when you're looking for a certain stimulus, if you go over that, you might be working too hard. It's going to be harder to recover. It's going to be harder to come back from, and you're not getting more benefit necessarily. So that's kind of what I was saying. 100 degrees Celsius. I was going to say that, but I didn't want to like be way off and be really embarrassed.
Well, I didn't know either, and I bet a lot of people listening didn't know.
Yeah,
So
well,
now
there
we
you go.
learned a little fun fact about science, and I do think that's a great analogy. And we were talking to Paul Chalimo way back, and he said a similar thing. Like, if you're gonna go like for this workout, you can go harder. There's like a range, right? And you're not going to be able to recover as fast. But if you give like just a little bit less, you're getting the same adaptations while being able to recover better. For certain workouts, this is, there's a lot of different scenarios that we're going to be working at different efforts. But I really like that way that you phrased it. At a certain point, you're not going to be gaining more by pushing yourself constantly over the edge, so to speak. And so I guess I want to ask you, like, you obviously know how to work hard. You do that on a regular basis. You can see that in your racing, back to back, Boston, top American, and then his previous Boston, you ran a PR. So congratulations on that. 2:24:51, so fast. So when are times that you are going to be working hard, and what does that look like for you?
I mean, working hard is it's like a very subjective thing to say. So it's not like I'm not going out there and working hard every day. It's just like, what does that hard work look like, and what's the point of it, and like how hard is it, right? So if you're saying like, when are you going out and giving like 100% effort, and like that's going to be like races and time trials, if we're talking about workouts, if we're talking about like working really hard at being a good athlete, meaning recovering hard, planning hard, doing all the other stuff, that's like a daily thing. So yeah, I guess does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And I think that's there was another topic that we might have been able to discuss here today, and that was like using workouts for your peak race. And those are time trials, things of that nature, where you're going to be going hard, but you do practice being uncomfortable, but just not at that same level when you're doing different kinds of workouts, but you're not going 100%. And I think that is often a trap that runners fall into, because if they don't know what the purpose is of the workout, they'll see a certain thing on their schedule and they'll just go hard. And without having a coach to talk them through what that would mean, sometimes they might fall into that category where they're just over exerting themselves and not getting the benefits that they really want and desire. And that's why they're working so hard. That's why this topic is so important, because I think a lot of people that do overtrain, it's because they do really want it. So yeah, I appreciate you shedding light onto that. And in the conversation that you had with CNBC, you also talked about toughness and what that looks like and how it's different than most people think. Would you talk us through a little bit of that too?
Yeah, I think, a lot of people think about mental toughness and they're like, okay, that means I'm gonna like, grind through this, or like be able to like work through pain, which it could be at some points. But how I think about mental toughness is being disciplined enough to understand what I have to do and when I have to do it, and having like, so that's one aspect of mental toughness. It's like, okay, I really need these wins for this is an example for this week, because I need to prove to myself that like I'm getting faster, or I need a really good workout. But it's really it's mental toughness to me is like being like, okay, here's what's going on in my life. Like, here's, what I need out of this workout. I'm going to execute that plan without like letting my emotions take control of me. And then it's doing that, like that's how you're going to like be consistent, right? It's just like understanding things, being disciplined, continuing to like let go of your ego and show up no matter like how the workout goes, or basically how you feel, to be completely honest. And then being able to go into a race and be like, okay, here's what my training indicates. Here's my training plan. I know I can do that because like, that's what my training has said. That's like what I know I can do. And, throughout that plan, say it's a marathon, like it will still get hard because it's a marathon, and you'll still have to like, have these moments to get through these really, really hard times. But those things come through practice of doing it, in, races leading up to the big race. It's doing all of your, mental prep, which can be like positive self-talk. It can be meditation. It can be learning to stay in the moment. It can be letting go of your ego at certain times. It can be truly understanding your why. All of those things will come into play when you're like getting through the tough situations during the marathon. And so, yeah, that's kind of my view on mental toughness.
That's profound. Sounds very deep. Can you give us an example of this in your own racing?
I mean, I think so. I guess you could go back to my last Boston, which I PR'd in. So it was obviously like a good race for me. But this goes back to like, January when I started, or January, February when I started training for Boston. And, you have to, life throws so many different things at you, no matter who you are, no matter like what level of eliteness you are or how much you try to control. Things will be thrown at you. You're human. Your body's not always going to feel good. And so at that point, I was like pretty sick when I started training, and I had a lot of just different like stresses going on in my life. And I knew like I couldn't be out there every day and train like I wanted to, because I wasn't getting the sleep I needed to get. I wasn't healthy enough to do that. Like these like hard workouts like really would not benefit me, because I knew my body wasn't in a place to make the adaptations that what I wanted from them. So I was like, okay, that sucks. Like I would yes, I would love to go hard. I would love to pretend like I'm going to like run, like a 223 at Boston. But I'm like, okay, that's not really where I'm at right now. I'm going to take where I'm at. I'm going to be disciplined. I'm going to be understanding of like just continuing to show up. I'm going to like not let my ego of being the top American the last 2 years, like get the best of me. And I'm going to do what I can. I'm going to like get through these mediocre workouts that I'm not like super stoked about. I'm going to keep doing them. And then come race day, I'm like, okay, my plan is I know I can run 5:30s. I'm going to have to let that first group go. I'm going to have to like really run my own race. I cannot for where I was and like how much energy I had, I can't pull off any of the surges that are going to happen. So I was like, I'm really going to have to trust myself and just like know that I can run a solid race, be okay with it, and be able to walk away with it, And so doing that, running your own race, having the mental toughness to stay with your plans, trust yourself. And when it did get hard at the end, and I was like, I was like in 15th, 16th place, where I've never finished out of the top 10 at a major marathon. If you let that emotion get the best of you, and if you're like, man, why am I here? This sucks, or like I should give up, or this is hard, I'm not even doing well, then, your body will fold very quickly because it's not comfortable. It wants to stop anyways. So you have to just continue to be positive, continue to tell yourself, like you can do this, keep going, one foot in front of the other. Have those tricks to just keep you going through those times. And so that's kind of like a long example for me.
You like long examples. All right. Hear the race unfold when we're talking to someone like you. I know a lot of podcasts that's their objective is to do race recaps. So we like to add in a topic, to discuss something that is so powerful as we hear an example of something that you've really dialed in, and we've seen how you've really flourished within that mindset, and your athletes too. So it's really cool to hear the inside scoop of what's going on in your head and how you've overcome this very relatable thing. It's actually something that was really cool about the press conference at the 25K championships, to hear you say like, yeah, this is a relatable sport. Like you're doing it at a professional level but all of us can get glimpses into what you're doing and be able to nod and say, yes, I get that. And this struggle is so profound as we look to see how and when we're supposed to go hard and what that means, like as it relates to toughness, as you've dived into. I think that that's really, really cool that you shared that with us. When do people go too hard, do you think? And, you had kind of dived into that a little bit before, but as you've worked with athletes and you've done your own training, what are some pitfalls that people will fall into when it comes to going too hard?
I think, likely people go too hard all the time. And, like, I think easy runs, it's very easy for, athletes to go too hard, and they just don't have the recovery they need for their hard workout, so they're kind of stuck in that middle ground, and that's like a really, it would be good. Like I think athletes could benefit from, like they really do need to learn what easy feels like, and I think that takes a long time because I think you have to first develop a certain amount of fitness to have a differential between your medium hard and easy. Because I think when you first start running or you're not that fit, like there isn't really a big difference between those things. And so it takes people a long time to learn because they're like, wait, like I'm supposed to go easy on my easy run. Well, that's not really a thing for them, to be completely honest. And so then they just get into this habit of going hard, and then it just like they never, unless they have someone like asking them the right questions, guiding them, kind of like having that conversation about like what that means. They might not know, they might not ever realize what that truly means. So another way to do it is to, be tested, like having a ramp test or a stress test to see like, okay, what are my zones, and like giving them like a number. And I think that's a good kind of start to do it. So they're like, okay, I have this heart rate or I have this pace to go off of at first, but to just make sure that like they're also having the conversation. So they're not just disregarding how they feel and their actual physical body. But they're also, they can kind of combine that with the data. So easy runs, like workouts, like I think it's really important to know for the athletes go too hard on workouts, they need to know the purpose of the workout so that they can slow down. If they don't know the purpose, they're going to think that like faster is better. So if you're like, okay, look, your critical velocity here is, this pace. If you go over it, like you can't sustain that. And we're not making you more efficient at that pace that you can sustain. So we need you to stay back here. Like, I understand you can go faster, but like, that won't benefit you, you know, and just making sure athletes know that. I think that really, the why really helps. So I think, yeah, that's basically where athletes go too hard. And then, you know, I think it's almost like a lesson that most runners have to go through and then you have to like really trust not to do that, which is hard, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of things that can make that hard. For me, one of the things is social running, because I have a really hard time with effort perception when I'm running with other people. I feel great. I feel so good. And I'm not really listening. So I have to be more intentional about protecting my easy days. Do you see competitive, like either social running or like having a competitive nature as being some kinds of, how do I want to say this, ways that people get caught up in going too hard?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. You know, when you talk to some people, they get caught up in Strava or people around them. Absolutely. And I think, like, you know, I think the social part of running is really, really important, and the community part. So like if it happens every once in a while and someone's like, oh, and like, that's fine. Like one like too hard, easy run is not going to hurt you. You know what I mean? It's like, if you're just constantly doing that. But yeah, like, I think as a coach, one of the things that I try to do and convey is like, this is like a really, you know, running is like a competitive sport. There's a lot of comparison. It's a way, it's like a vehicle to help yourself be grounded and like lose your ego and like listen to your body and like being okay with who you are and where you're at. So I think people do get really lost in what you said, but it's important to like notice that.
You had mentioned in this article too about how, let's see if I can find it. Where did I write it? It was about like the absence of negativity. So you mentioned in the article about the absence of negativity, or how you are able to maybe push aside some of the things that could distract you from listening to your own body. So how do you process that? What did you mean by the absence of negativity to help you in running and then in races too?
I just think it's like, I think it's natural for humans or for us to when we get nervous or scared or, you know, have this big event coming up, for negative self-talk to come in. And when you're at such a state during racing where, you know, you're very fragile, I think you have to like, you can't have that negative self-talk or that negative voice in your head, because that is going to tip you over the edge, you know, and it's going to like tell your body, you know, we're all connected. It's going to tell your physical body to like slow down or give up. And I think that the first like way to like deal with that is to definitely like be aware of it, you know, and if you're aware of it, you can practice ways to like push it out and be like, nope, not right now, you know? And it takes practice, just like anything. Like you're like, okay, ding, ding, I have some negative self-talk coming on. Like usually for people, it's like always the same, or they have the same insecurities or the same like problems. And then you realize that, and then you can kind of push aside and, you know, have the mental willpower to like replace it with something positive.
Yeah, your example of Boston this year, when you're like, I'm out of place to where I wanted to be. And it would be easy at that point, as you mentioned, to start thinking like, oh, I don't know, like, is it worth giving the extra press? Like in that moment, how did you banish like negative thoughts and then end up running a PR? Because in that moment, you could have lost an opportunity to run a PR if you would have been so focused on a certain placement. So how did you overcome that?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, first of all, I didn't have any like real expectations. So that's like the first thing. You have to like kind of let go of, especially like unrealistic expectations, which I think a lot of people have going into races. I think running is like such a weird sport where there's so many people who have unrealistic expectations, or they're a little delusional. And like I feel bad saying that, but like the more people you talk to, you're like, but like you gotta be, it's hard because we all want to be faster. We all really want the work we put in to equal what we get out. You know what I mean? And sometimes that is just like totally not the case, or we want the effort and passion we put in to reflect on the work. And like in running, that's just like totally not going to be true all the time. It is true sometimes, and especially if you keep showing up. But so the first thing is like, I went into the race not having like very realistic expectations. Like, okay, like here's what has shown in my practice. So like that in itself right away helps me not have this anxiety and these negative thoughts, because I'm okay with whatever place I'm at. That's not the forefront of my mind. That's not like, oh no, oh shit, my effort level right now is not matching this unrealistic pace that I want. So that is number one, is just like knowing what like is before the race starts. And then it's just not letting any excuses, not having any excuses. There's no excuses when you're running. It's just like, okay, here I am, got to keep going. It is what it is. Like all you can do is the best on that day. And you just like do the best you can. If that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, that's all you can do, is the best you can in the day, and running 20 miles at a certain dream pace is not the full marathon. It's giving what you have that day to have the best day possible. And I think that relates too with working too hard in training, because you have to be realistic too about, and release that anxiety as well, to release that anxiety and not try to be somewhere that you're not at right now. Like being honest with yourself, saying, I'm here right now. I'm not going to try to chase what I call the phantom ponytail. I call it. I'm not going to try to chase this phantom ponytail of what I think I should be, or where I think I should be, but really where I'm at right now.
Yeah.
Yep. And skipping steps. I think you had mentioned that too, skipping steps, because we want to get so badly to this dreamy goal. So patience is part of that process too. Can you give us an example of how you've had to have patience in your running, or had to kind of get to that place where you gave us one example. Is there another example of that in your running career?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm really lucky to have a very, I would say like wise coach who's been in it for a long time and seen a lot. And I think from the get-go, like right when I started my adult running career, my coach, my first marathon was CIM. And he said, like I was like pretty clueless. Like, I was just like, I don't know what's fast. I didn't care. I was just like running because I loved it. And so going into the marathon, like, I think he was pretty confident I could run very well, but he was like, I just want you to like finish strong. I want you to feel good. I want you to go out, basically jog the thing, so that you can figure out if you even like the distance, if you like the sport, if you want to take your career further. If he was like, cause you have, I was like 30 at the time. He's like, you have like 10 to 12 more years of this if you want it. He's like, and you can't start, like, the last thing we want you to do is like starting too fast, because like then progression is not going to be what we want it to be, which is like little baby steps forward. You know, we don't want to like push it too hard, push your body too hard where you're going to have to take steps backwards. So that is like some of the best advice I've gotten is like, you know, and that's how I like look at my whole career. I'm like, okay, yeah, I ran 2:31 my first race. My second was grandma's. I won in like I don't know what I ran, 2:28. But like none of these races am I like, I have to have a huge breakthrough. I have to win that. You know, they're like, okay, they're all gearing up towards like my future. So yeah.
Yeah, having that healthy perspective and not feeling like you need to rush progress, because it's impossible to physiologically anyway to be rushing all of these things. So I think that's a powerful thing for all of us to hear, for me to hear, and everyone listening right now. Speaking of which, we're at the last part of this interview, and I don't want it to end because there's so many questions I could ask you, Nell. But what is something that you would say to someone who's kind of stuck right now and they're feeling flustered about where they're at? What encouragement could you give them today?
Yeah, I think when I'm like stuck, because it happens to all of us, all of us, I like, those are like the hardest times, you know, like it's not hard when you're like doing well and you're progressing. It's not hard, you know, like that, those are hard times when you're like, like I don't feel good. Like, I don't know why I'm not getting faster, you know, like I'm just like, it's just like tough time. Like that's what it's all about, you know? And that's like what is really exciting about running for me is it's the challenges and the hard parts, because that's honestly why we do it. You can't do it just for the good parts, because running is, you know, I would say not, you know, it's at least 50-50 bad and good. I'm not like that. There's no question about it. So, you have to like enjoy those parts and like be like, this is the challenge, like, and any challenge should be exciting, you know, for you. And that's the thing is like, find that, like, you know, that's when your growth comes. So like, keep going, get through it. And it'll pay off and you'll be like such a stronger person for it.
I'm all pumped up now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Slow down, people. Slow down. I know you're listening and running at the same time, but that really comes together. Well, thank you so much, Nell, for coming on the show. I appreciate it. On behalf of our audience, they appreciate it too. So thank you so much and good luck in your future endeavors.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, getting started with the World of Running segment, we have to start with some shout outs to our peoples.
Shout out.
First, Jacob, congrats on a massive 5K PR, and we must say, finally achieving a major benchmark as well. Jacob's been chasing this one for a bit and finally ran under 17 minutes for the first time. But not only did he run under 17 minutes, he basically also ran almost under 16 minutes. I mean, well, close enough, right? 16:36. So we don't usually like say all the times that everyone's running and stuff, but you got to get an idea here for, like, he was trying to do one thing and smashed it.
Substantial.
So well done, Jacob.
Very
I
cool.
hope you're very pleased with that.
Emily also ran a 5K at the same race, the Deemer Run, and then Dan O ran the Ludington Lakeside Half Marathon and won his age group.
Winning.
Woohoo.
Good stuff. Well, there's a lot of winning to talk about here. Winning in all the senses and all the ways. So we should probably just start by simply saying Paris Diamond League meet, which if you have not seen or heard anything from that, it's because you don't see or hear anything about running ever.
That's not true, Zach.
Yes, it is, because this is like the headline news of our era, of our modern era. In one track meet, one single meet. And it's not even a complete track meet because they have only a few events. In this one Paris Diamond League meet, 3 world records were broken in distance races.
Absolutely incredible.
And all of them are substantial world records at that.
Yeah, really impressive ones. Let's start with the 2-mile world best, because officially it's not a
I'm not doing that.
world record.
I'm not doing that. World Athletics can
just call it a world
pretend all
record.
they want that they don't honor this record,
It's-
but everyone else does. So
Right.
they're
Because
in
it's
the
previously
out.
held by Daniel Coleman.
Coleman, yeah.
And I watched that race just recently again, just to remind myself. And it was an incredible race. And then to see how Jakob Ingebrigtsen, after all of this time, is finally trying to set this record. And it was still hard. Like, it was like he had
Yeah.
to push so hard. And it just shows you how good Daniel Coleman was back 26 years
20
ago.
years ago. Yeah, right.
26 years ago, he ran a time of 7:58.61
Yeah.
in the 2-mile. So that was the record that Jakob Ingebrigtsen was chasing. And just a brief reminder about Jakob Ingebrigtsen. If you don't follow the show and hear Zach always talking about
It's not just me. It's not just me.
It's not just you. He was the youngest. He was the youngest person to ever break 4 minutes in the mile. He did
At
that
the
at
time.
16 years old.
Others have now younger than him.
Yeah, but he was
yes.
the first. He was the first one at that age, and he's won world gold and he's won Olympic gold. He holds the world record in the 1,500 meter
Indoors.
So or is it the
No,
15?
he doesn't have the mile. He has the 1,500.
Okay,
Indoors.
gotcha. So anyway, that's who Jakob Ingebrigtsen is,
Yep.
and it was very interesting how this all played out, because in the beginning he does what Jakob Ingebrigtsen does, and that's kind of like sit in the middle-ish. And
Yeah.
there were some elbows and some. There's one time, what would Jakob do that I was like, what?
I have no idea what you're talking about right now. Did he do something strange?
No, it was just pretty much like somebody was trying to like edge him out, like it was
Oh,
moving. And
yeah,
he was
in
like,
the start,
no, you're
in the
not
start
gonna
of the
do
race,
that.
it was just right in the start.
Mhm.
Someone came up to like pass him and then start kind of like cutting in front of him, and he basically just pushed him away, like,
Like,
get
no,
out of my way.
You're not gonna do
You're,
that.
you're not gonna get in front of me and slow me down. I'm doing this thing right now. Get behind.
It's
And
kind of aggressive.
so then the guy did, and he belonged behind him. Jakob Ingebrigtsen was about to try to break a world record. Don't mess with that, people.
yeah.
And
well,
by the way, he did it.
he
by
did
a
it.
lot.
Yes. So he passed the 3,000 meter mark in 7:24.07, which would have been number 3 on the all-time outdoor list in and of itself.
Yeah, that's good.
And then his last lap was 55 seconds.
Right.
What?
And it had to be to get this record because he was having a little bit of a hard time with it.
He was pushing.
Yep.
And he had, of course, he did a lot of that alone. And he had the lights, which he did credit later. Like I had these lights
Lights
going,
helped him,
and it was a great crowd in Paris. So it was
Well,
a good setup. But
what time did he run?
Yeah, exactly. He didn't just barely break it. He ran 7:54.10.
Yeah.
So over 4 seconds. He improved it by over 4 seconds.
I mean, so understand what happens here. He ran basically 357 miles twice in a row. Like that's virtually incomprehensible. Yeah, so that's Jakob, right? At one point, I have to say this. At one point, if you were following the Let's Run message threads, which you shouldn't,
Don't.
but if you were, so I read the garbage so that you don't all have to, and I just tell you.
Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, that's why. So, someone started a thread recently, and they're like, "Has anyone else noticed that Jakob Ingebrigtsen hasn't really been improving anymore? Like he's been winning still, but he's always been winning. He's not getting any faster." And then he did this. And I'm like, oh, you must feel no, actually, they don't ever feel badly about their terrible wrongness because they're just always being terribly wrong. All right, so that was great. That started the day, right? Now, let us at least just note that NBC, that terrible organization,
Stop it. Don't be negative. Stop
commands all the rights of everything, not because they want to produce quality stuff for us to watch.
It was good.
But because they don't want anyone else to have it.
Well, there is always it's always difficult because you don't know where to go to watch things because
Anyway,
it changes.
yes.
And
So Andy wants to hedge because she doesn't want me
I
to
don't
talk
want him to
badly
be.
about NBC.
No, I don't. I don't like you talking badly about anyone.
But you can think badly about them if you want to. So the point is, they weren't going to include this event in their live coverage of the event. Like, they just weren't going to start it later because technically, I guess you could say this started like earlier than the premium time. I don't know what the time. I don't know how these things work. But anyway, they just weren't going to include it. And it's like, are you kidding me?
There's probably like
Are you
another
daft? This is like the reason everyone in the world's
Yeah.
watching the meet. He's Jakob Ingebrigtsen. He's like the most famous distance runner on the planet. And so apparently someone got through to them and convinced them to start the coverage earlier. But it was like half-hearted coverage, semi-shabby coverage. Like, at least got that race into it, right? So good on them for that.
Yes.
So we were able to actually see it if we had access to the NBC coverage, which is only available via Peacock, which I have no idea why that is. But anyway, so point is, you could see it, and it was amazing.
Yeah. And now you can see it on YouTube. They do have not full coverage of the event,
Like
but
parts of it.
a
Yeah.
highlight of the event.
Yeah.
So that's at least something. I do want to mention, and we probably were going to mention it later too, but there are rumblings of going after a world record in Oslo in the 1,500 meter run for Jakob Ingebrigtsen. And there was some
next Diamond League.
which is the next Diamond League event, and this gave him a confidence booster, so he said in a post-race interview. So that will be exciting.
We'll see. I
We'll
mean,
see.
you might as well at this point because all the world records are going down right now because you remember Faith Kipyegon.
You can't forget Faith Kipyegon because she keeps going
Well-
after it, winning. Last week she got the 1,500 meter world record, which is something that she's been trying to achieve for a long time. I mean, she keeps winning it, but it has been something she's verbalized that she wants to get this world record, and she did that last week. Well, I had said, well, maybe stuttered through, but said that I thought that would free her up to do other things. And I thought it was interesting to then see her in the 5,000 meter run
The
in
very
Paris
next week.
Next week, again, freed her up to do something different. And she ran, so the lights were set for 14:10. And that is
current
not
world record holder's 14:06.
right. So the lights were not set for world record pace.
But you have to remember that chiefly among those who would be pursuing that 14:10 are the likes of Faith Kipyegon and Letesenbet Gide of Ethiopia. And Gide prefers to negative split her races. So she would be one who would like the lights to be a little bit slower than the pace she thinks she can run, because then she'll proceed to try to increase over the final few
Gotcha.
laps. Yes.
There's all kinds of strategies with that. So who gets the final say, right? It's probably the reigning champion, or I don't know. That's a very interesting thought, like who gets to determine what the lights do.
So Faith Kipyegon, who by the way has not run a 5,000 prior to this one for years, comes into this race on world record pace, more or less.
Well, no, they were on 14:10 pace.
It's the same concept.
Well, I
A
think
few
that it
seconds
makes
off
the
world
end.
record pace.
It makes the end of the race even
Okay,
more impressive.
so how
because
did it
they're in
happen?
14:10. Okay, so pretty much it was the Faith Kipyegon and Letesenbet Gide show.
I mean, it was the Letesenbet Gide show, and Faith Kipyegon was just
she's
hanging
on her heels, but it was the two of them. They separated and they were doing their thing. I think Taye was third, but she was pretty far back. She wasn't in contact. So the two of them were going and were right around the lights. And I'm trying to see where they were off. I think it was around 4K that it looked like they weren't
1,000 to go. Yeah.
Yeah, they weren't gonna quite get the world record.
They were starting to slow down.
Yeah, so they were losing their reach on the lights, and so at that point the announcers were like, "Oh, it looks like they're just gonna be right off the record," and it was gonna be a very strong 5,000 meter run. But the story is not over because Kipyegon took the lead 2 laps before, but she didn't actually accelerate at that point. But she started picking it up slightly at the bell, but it was like 200 meters to go where she decided that she was going to turn her wheels on those Faith Kipyegon 1,500 meter speed shoes and go, because it was incredible. She ran 28 seconds in her last 200. She covered her last 400 in 60 seconds.
Yeah.
So she ended
So
up.
what'd you run?
She ended up with a final time of 14:05.20, which is a world record.
Against the previous world record
exactly.
holder.
But she was floored. I think
she looked like she was totally in shock
Yeah,
at
yeah.
the end of the race. How did this just happen?
I love moments like that. I love to see them because they are just really special. Like seeing people cross the finish line, no matter what they're doing, is a very emotional thing because people put so much of themselves and all this effort. They drain the well and then they cross the finish line. It's such an emotional thing. And to see her with that surprise and not even knowing that was in her reach that day was just phenomenal to see. And such a great race because Lentezabet Gidey was only 1 second off of her previous time.
Yeah, she ran 14:07.9.
Yeah, which is her
second time under 14:10.
Yeah, she's actually the first woman to break 14:10 twice. And this time of 14:07.94 is the third time in history, or third fastest time in history. Yeah. I was like, my heart was racing and I was really getting into it. So
for those who saw it, this is reminiscent of the Hisham El Garouche mile world record with Noah Negeni right behind him, and the two of them together. Like if LG wouldn't have broken the record, Negeni would have behind him. And so it's like one of those moments where it's not just a record attempt. Like when Gidey set the 14:06 record, she's just a solo run. It was just her and the Pacers and then her by herself with the lights. But this was a race.
Yeah.
And it happened to be a world record, which just is so exciting.
Yeah.
So I have long said it, and this just reinforces it now in my mind, that unless something wrong happens to Faith Kipyegon, there is not a runner in the world who can beat her in a race right now. Nobody can beat her in a race right now if she is
on fire.
If she is having a day and not just like flat, because the way she finishes at world record pace in a 5,000 like that in an event that's not even like something she's super comfortable doing right now, crazy.
Yeah.
Well,
she didn't look comfortable. Neither of them look comfortable.
She doesn't have to be comfortable. She can still run a 28
because they know how to be uncomfortable.
200.
Exactly.
So, but it wasn't just that, because then in third place was Taye of Ethiopia in 14:13, which is the number 8 time in history.
Yeah.
And 6 women were under 14:30, which is
crazy,
insane.
That's a record for a single race, by the way.
For a single race.
And American Alicia Munson was 8th in a time of 14:34.88. That's only 3 seconds off her personal best, and she was coming off some sickness. So
a couple of years ago, that would have been the American record.
It's awesome.
Something. Well, there's more.
There's more.
It didn't end there. So the last event that was touted as like this could be something was the men's 3,000 steeplechase. And the main reason why it was like this could really happen is because Lemaitre Girma of Ethiopia was going for, yes, you knew it, the world record after he set the world record 3,000 meters recently.
Indoors, right?
Whatever it was, yes. But so
indoor, yep.
Indoor 3,000 meters. So he sets a world record in the 3,000 flat that tells you if you can run that fast on a 3,000 without jumping, you should be able to run this fast with jumping.
And he definitely ran with that kind of confidence in this race. In fact, there was a period of time where he was running maybe too fast and he started fading and made us all like wonder, oh no, is this going to be a crash and burn scenario? But he held on strong.
It was wild. It was wild because
tiring.
Yeah, in the middle of the race, which is okay. If you're familiar with the concept here, steeplechase, you have to jump, right, 5 times the length. And one of the jumps includes like an obstacle after the jump with a pit of water, right? So
10 feet, graded up.
So you have to remember that as your fatigue increases, the impact forces of those jumps is even higher than normal running impact forces. So it's going to multiply your fatigue that much more. And so for a 3,000 meter run, which is already a very challenging distance to do it like an all-out effort, because you're basically at like you're literally running at VO2 max the whole time. It's very painful. And in the middle of the race, which is like you want to be saving as much as you can in these types of things, he starts picking it up when he's already on world record pace.
So way above, he was like way in front of the lights.
Just accelerate. And we're watching this thinking, what is he doing? There's no way he could literally run that much faster than the world record. But then, of course, you start to wonder, well, maybe he can.
Yeah.
Well, he lost a little bit of that late in the race as he was clearly fatiguing to the point where it started to look like with the lap to go that he wasn't even going to be able to do it, that he was going to fall
the lights
apart.
were on his heels.
With 400 meters to go, he was losing it. But then 300 to go, it's clear that he's like, no, I can't let this go.
Right.
I can't let this get away from me. So he starts dialing it back in. 200 to go is like, yep, he's going to do it. Unless he falls. But he did not fall.
He didn't fall.
He stumbled a little bit.
Clean over those two barriers. Yep. So his time, his new world record, second world record of 2023, as we mentioned, he got that indoor 3,000 meter record. So his new steeplechase world record is 7:52.11.
That is incredible.
So it is really, and it's good to see him get this, in some ways, because he's been the runner-up at so many important events.
This guy is so good at being second.
Yes. So it's great to see him get his steeplechase glory. So at the
all these second places.
I wrote him down because I was at the 2019 World Championships in Doha. He was silver in the steeplechase, losing to Kipruto of Kenya, and then at the 2021 Olympics in Tokyo, he was silver to Soufiane El-Bakkali. At the 2022 Indoor Championships in Belgrade, in the 3,000 meter flat run, he lost to Salman Barega. And then finally in Eugene last year at the World Championships, he got the silver medal again, losing to now his fiercest rival, Soufiane El-Bakkali.
So you heard it. Girma has never won a championship. Never. But he's been second more than probably anybody else.
Yeah.
So
great consistency.
And he holds 2 world records now. So this guy's just like,
people are still like, El-Bakkali. I think he's going to give El-Bakkali a run for his money.
Oh, he certainly is capable, but you have to understand, El-Bakkali just ran, what did he just run? 7:58? I mean, El-Bakkali is capable of this world record as well.
Yeah, I think he was only like was it 3 seconds over? I can't remember.
Yeah, because 7:55 was the previous.
Foggy.
So, yeah.
Numbers
anyway, the point is, El-Bakkali is also capable of this time. So, by doing it, Girma claims it, but then a couple people were just saying recently, well, there's a good chance El-Bakkali is just going to snipe it from him within the next week or two. So, that would be a bummer. But at the same time, Girma did it first. So there. Well, there was a lot of other great things happening, but
or the 800.
We would spend all our time here.
Well, we should mention the women's 800. I didn't write it down, but just to put it out there.
Keely Hodgkinson
crushed
everybody.
She ran
embarrassed the world.
A new record for Great Britain. She ran 155 and change, and that's a personal best for her after struggling with injury. So she was coming just to see what she could do, to put her toes in the water. And what did she do? PB and national record. Second was previous podcast guest Ajay Wilson of the USA, running really strong. So
her first defeat on the season, too.
It is her first defeat on the season. So things are looking really good for Ajay Wilson, whose PR is actually 155 and change too. So, anyway, that was
Hodgkinson did manage to fluff her hair for the photos, the finish as well.
Yeah.
So she got a little bit of her vanity accomplished.
Stop it.
I'm not being negative. It was
so
funny.
Let's get back to a good thing. Grayson Murphy won the world championship in the mountain classic event, representing Team USA. Grayson Murphy was bronze in the vertical uphill race just 3 days before. So coming off of the vertical uphill race, which I really can't imagine how that makes your legs feel. But she won that mountain classic event in the time of 1:04.29, which was almost a minute ahead of Sweden's Tove Alexandersson, who's a 17-time world champion gold medalist in orienteering. So this is a very accomplished woman. And then I should mention that Murphy won the 2019 title as well, and that was her debut in event. Last year, she was injured, so she's coming back and getting that title once more, proving herself to be an extraordinary runner in this discipline. On the men's side, it was won by Ugandan Leonard Cheptemai, and then Cheptimai. Oh, I should mention that Cheptimai last year won the U20 Mountain Classic. So Chemutai, and that was in Thailand. And for the country's scoring, because of course this is a world event where they score as teams, Kenya won for both the men and the women.
Wow, they're good at running mountains.
They are, yeah.
That's a very difficult thing.
But Chemtuai said that the Ugandans are on the rise. And I can see that because I think it was like 2 of the top 3 in the U20 were Ugandan.
Well, the Ugandans are on the rise in distance running in general across all areas. Yes, that is true. All right. Now, for our final note here, is the NCAA championships. We mentioned this was a busy weekend. And this isn't even the only other thing that happened, but we would spend our whole time talking about
which we
all
love
this
to
stuff.
do, but it'd be too long.
So let's try to do this. We're going to just highlight the ones that we found the most interesting. There's, of course, lots of things happening in lots of events, but
lots of impressive running.
Should be noted that the championships this year were held in Austin, Texas in June. So it's hot, it's humid, and that definitely makes things difficult, especially for the distance events. But it also makes things interesting because it changes the way people race too, which is always kind of fun. So not always, actually. It didn't always change how people raced, but sometimes it does. And you never know.
Maybe it should.
Well, for some it should have more than it did.
Yeah.
So on the men's side, in the 5,000 and 10,000, and this happens a lot at the NCAAs. You get a lot of people who do the 10,000 and then come back and double into the 5,000. Sometimes they do well. Sometimes they struggle quite a bit. In this instance, Kai Robinson of Stanford won them both.
Amazingly.
Which is an incredible... In fact, the last one to do that was Ed Cheserek of Oregon.
Oh, yeah.
Some time ago.
Okay.
Yes. The legendary Ed Cheserek himself.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that being the case, Robinson's teammate Charles Hicks was second in the 10,000 also. So Stanford had a really strong showing in between those two. Charles Hicks won cross country, if you recall, NCAA championships in the fall. And so Robinson...
Which one did?
Hicks.
Yes. And he what's his nationality?
He's American, I believe.
Okay, because Kai Robinson's from Australia. Okay.
Yes. So Robinson won both races in almost exactly the same way, which is kind of fascinating to watch. And it makes you wonder if people weren't like, maybe they should have, well, they probably just assumed he'd be really tired after that super hot and humid 10,000. He should have been. Somehow he wasn't. But
good fitness.
Yeah, right. I don't know. He trained well for the heat.
Great recovery.
He is from California, or trains in California. He's from Australia. I'm very familiar with running in the hot conditions because he ran World Cross Country Championships, which were in Australia, and finished really well, 20s. All right, so what he did was Kai Robinson just took over at 500 to go, which is an interesting moment to surge because everyone's waiting for the bell lap before they like really want to take off. So that final 100 meters of a straightaway before you get to the final lap mark, people are all kind of like almost rallying. You get this little sense of like they're getting ready. And while they were all getting ready, Kai Robinson was passing them. He was already at full steam ahead.
Yep.
And so they just couldn't react fast enough.
Yeah.
And he crushed them.
It was super strong. Yep. So that was both of those were exciting races to watch. In the 1,500 meter run, there was an upset. And, you know, you're not going to win them all. You're not going to win them all. And we've seen some really great running from Caitlin Toohey this past season. She's been the talk.
Multiple NCAA records this year.
Yeah. It's been incredible to watch her journey. And it's not all about this one big race for her. It's not just about nationals for her. So she did go for it. She went hard. She, in fact, gapped the field pretty early in the race.
Tried to win the race in the first couple laps.
Yeah, it was like probably halfway. And anyway, she wasn't able to continue to maintain that lead, and she was caught. And I think like 6 women might have passed her. But it was Harvard's Maya Ramsden of New Zealand who had the best finish of the day. And she ended up having a very clear victory, very strong final 200 there. And then 2 ended up scratching the 5,000. It just was not a great weekend for her. And that doesn't mean anything. That doesn't.
Andy's trying so hard not to sound like she's hating on Tui.
No, because I'm a big fan of Tui, and I think there's been a lot of pressure on her ever since high school, and I think that, and this happens when people are really good, then there ends up being tons of pressure and expectation, and then when they have a bad race, like everyone does, people start to question them, and that's silly because
I think
you're not going to have a good race every time.
I think that this was just a scenario where she tried to do something and it didn't work out. And her coach said afterward that she was like, her coach made it sound like she decided that Tui shouldn't run the 5,000. I doubt that's the case. I'm quite confident Tui was like, I don't want to do this. I'm not feeling good. They're on the same day. So there's no way she's feeling great after that 1,500. No. Especially when how hot it is and such.
And also, like, it takes a toll mentally, obviously, when you have people passing you like that. So anyway, it was for Maya Ramsden. She had a phenomenal race, and it was pretty large group of women that were together until that final straight. So very competitive.
Well, in the men's 1,500, it was an interesting outcome for a number of reasons. So the first thing to preface this is to say that Washington University has, is it University of Washington or Washington University? I don't know. Anyway, Washington has this like current incredible dominance of miler capacity. So if you recall in indoor season, they had that one meet where 8 of their men ran sub-4 in the same race. Remember that?
Yeah, I do remember that.
So
it's nuts.
And then Luke Hauser from Washington went on to win the indoor mile, which is incredible. And they also took 4th and 5th in the indoor mile. So good things all around. Well, in this race, come finals, Washington's got 3 guys in the race. And of those 3, Joe Wascom, who's the defending outdoor 1,500 champion, Luke Hauser, who's the indoor mile champion, and then Nathan Green, who doesn't yet have victory, right? And so it's like, wow, of the 3 guys here, 2 of them are already national champions at this distance. Like, these guys are really good. Yeah. And they ran like guys who are really good and know how to win this race. And so as it happens, as things unfold in the final 200 meters, who starts breaking away from everyone but Joe Wascom and Nathan Green? Luke Hauser started to as well, but then he, with about 100 to go, he didn't look like he had another gear and just kind of faded out of the conversation. But Wascom ends up in the lead with about 100 to go, but then can't quite hold it. And it's Nathan Green, the one who doesn't yet have a title, who turns it out. Massive last 100 to win the race. Wascom rallies a little bit to finish second. So Washington goes 1 and 2 in the 1,500 and ends up now being the case that out of those 3 guys who finished that final, all 3 of them have individual titles. Wow. In this relative distance.
That's cool.
That is
What a way to do things as a team. I mean, they didn't choose that, but it's cool that it happened for them.
Cool that it happened. And Wascom was clearly super thrilled for Green at the end.
That's cool.
He was very excited for
camaraderie
him.
That's
nice.
Strong like that, yeah.
And he had to also feel good about the fact that he still ended up second.
Right.
If you're not going to win, at least your teammate did.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. In the women's 5,000, it was Florida's Parker Velby who made it her race. It was her race. It was apparent from the very beginning. In fact, I think she was leading by like the second lap.
It was her race to lose from the beginning.
Yeah. But it was interesting because from what the announcers said, and I didn't do fact checks on this, but it sounded like Parker had been struggling with injury quite a bit. In fact, only running a couple days a week and then cross training. So it was an incredible race, especially for the tumultuous training season that she had leading in, but she put the pedal to the metal and she never relinquished her lead, and she gapped the field throughout the entire race and was never really challenged. She ran a time of 15:30 in the heat and humidity, only 10 seconds off of her PR, which is pretty incredible without the challenge and in those types of conditions also having all that injury stuff. That's amazing. I mean, I was actually talking about that with somebody today. I'm like, that is incredible. That's really incredible to not have a good build up and then be able to run this kind of time and at a championship.
Parker Velby needs to take next year off of racing. She needs to get totally healthy and then train better. She's clearly been training too aggressively because she can't be healthy for stretches of time. She's never been healthy for long stretches of time since she started college running. And then she's going to be one of the best in the world.
He said it.
If
He
she
said
does
it,
that.
folks.
But she isn't doing that. So
but you don't know all the details and all
Yeah.
of that of her training. But it was very impressive. Second and third place were also in the 10,000 meter run. So that just shows how strong these runners are. Everlyn Kemboy of Utah Valley and Emily Venters of Utah were second and third.
Yeah, and they were first and second in the 10,000.
Right. They ran both of these events.
So the two of them were familiar with racing against each other, just couldn't quite do what Parker Valby was doing, but yeah, it was something. Okay, well, the last one we want to mention here is the men's 800. Just a quick note because it was insane. Also, true freshman Will Sumner won the race from Georgia, literally, and also the school from Georgia, won the race in a wire-to-wire run and a negative split, which if you're familiar with the 800 meters, that's very uncommon that anyone would even want to do that. Apparently, it's believed to be less effective to negative split in 800 in terms of like the physiology of running in 800 meters, even though there are like some world record performances where negative splits, and I don't know. But anyway, people are always like, no, you can't negative split in 800. You need to positive split it for it to be the best possible race. Well, anyway, he negative split it and ran a 2-second PR.
Wow.
And ran the fifth fastest 800 meters all time in the NCAA as a true freshman.
True freshman.
What's incredible, though, is he's not the fastest true freshman because if you recall, Donovan Brazier at the NCAA championships, 4 years ago, won the race.
4 years ago. It was more than 4 years ago.
When was he a true freshman? Yeah, it was more. It was like 6 years ago.
It definitely was because he ran.
I think it was 6 years ago.
Remember he won his
I know,
Doha goal
in
in
2019.
Like,
Yeah. All right, so 6 years ago, Donovan Brazier, something like this. I don't know what it was. Anyway,
We're getting old.
Sumner ran almost the same kind of race that Brazier did when he did it. He just a touch slower, but number 5 all time. Sumner, as a high schooler, was the number 3 all-time high school 800-meter runner, and he currently still holds the U.S. 600-meter high school record. So, like, this dude is the future potential in everyone's eyes for U.S. 800-meter running. We'll see.
Yeah, you said it's the fastest time by an American this year.
Yeah, so currently he actually leads the U.S. performance list as a 19-year-old,
Wow.
which is also something, right? And he's the only American who currently holds the world champ standard.
Wow.
So that's something.
That's cool, though.
Yeah,
That's
very
cool.
cool.
Awesome. Well, that was the World of Running for this week. We loved having Nell Rojas on the show. If you loved it, feel free to share it with your friends. Tag us on Instagram and your stories if you listen. We would love to see that and connect with you more as it comes to content that we have on the show.
And if you like Zach's Batman voice, feel free to let us know. It sounds.
He'll get sick more often for you.
I'm Batman.
Well, thank you all for joining us, and we'll talk to you next week.